Okay, good evening. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. The time is 5:30 p.m. I want to be mindful of everybody's time, so we are going to call our work session to order. Mr. Parker, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Daniels? Ms. Davis?
Present.
Ms. Green? Mr. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Rawls?
Present.
Mr. Rodriguez? And Ms. Bowers?
Present. Please note Councilman Rodriguez is excused this evening. We will begin with our committee business. The first committee you will hear from this evening is the Administration Committee. We have two resolutions for discussion, Resolution 28 of 2024 and Resolution 29 of 2024. Mr. Parker, could you please read both resolutions into the record?
Certainly. Resolution 28 of 2024, a resolution appointing Gloria Martin Roberts to serve on the Board of Directors of the Harrisburg Housing Authority. Resolution 29 of 2024, a resolution appointing Zachary D. Jackson Sr. to serve on the Board of Directors of the Harrisburg Housing Authority.
Thank you. I believe both of our appointees are present this evening. If you wouldn't mind joining us right in front of you, please. Okay, good evening. If you both wouldn't mind taking a few moments to introduce yourselves, please.
I'm Gloria Martin Roberts, Harrisburg City resident since the age of 7. Graduate of John Harris High School. Raised my family here. I'm a mother of 2 and a grandmother of 4 and a great-grandmother of 11 and a half great-grandchildren. I started on Monday as that was yesterday. I'm getting my days ahead of me, but as Director of Economic Development and Building and Housing. So all I had to do is come right downstairs here. So, you need to know anything else?
No, thank you.
All right.
Hi, my name is Zachary David Jackson, Senior. Graduated from Harrisburg High. The VOTEC as a welder, wound up in the Air Force for 11 years. Presently, I'm a construction inspector for the Department of Transportation, PennDOT, and I'm also the judge of elections for District 9-3. Two of my last children graduated from Sci-Tech High School. I was a PTA president there for 4 years when they were going through school. One went on to Pitt and one went to Howard University. And presently I'm just looking to help.
Okay, thank you. I just have one question for both of you before, well, maybe two questions for you, Ms. Martin Roberts, and then one question for both of you collectively. First, I just wanted to clarify, you mentioned you started yesterday, that was Monday, June the 3rd, serving in what capacity?
Director of Economic Development and Building and Housing.
Are you serving in an interim capacity or?
That is correct. I came out of retirement and I plan to go back into retirement. That is interim, yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. My other question is, and this may be for Solicitor Grover because I don't know if the former director participated on the board. I don't believe so. Is there any conflict of interest with this appointment, given the interim nature of her new role?
We do not appear before the housing board, so I don't know how that would be. I will double check the Authorization Act, which is I think from 1930, and see what it says, if it gives us any advice. But I believe the former director, not this one, years ago, served on that. He did. She was
Okay.
the PhD director for a long time.
Oh, okay. It's before my time. I'm not sure. I don't have the pleasure of knowing
She was
her,
under
but
Mayor Reed.
okay. Okay. If you could just clarify, I'd just be curious to make sure. And then my question for both of you, what do you think, or what's your interest in the board, and what do you think, what impact do you think you will be able to make through your involvement?
Want me to go first? Okay. Well, you know, I have been very involved with the issue of housing. I served on city council, as all of you know, and of course on my committee as chair of building and housing, where I was exposed to the significance of our housing issues in the city of Harrisburg, and especially for the least of us. Our housing stock, how many houses we have here that are just decaying, that we really could rehab and make them usable housing for people that live in the city, and truly make them affordable housing for people that live here. On my capacity as a consultant to the feds, I have dealt with housing issues, especially public housing. And the fact that I believe that public housing should just be a bridge, it should not be a permanent housing, that it should just be a bridge to help people get to the next level of housing, which is home ownership. I believe that one of the agencies that have not progressed so very well in the United States is public housing. It's the same thing that it's always been, nothing really creative, nothing really progressive, and nothing really that helps bring people out of poverty. And I think that's what it's all about, poverty. To me, when you give people menial housing and you expect them to be proud of that housing and to be comfortable with that housing, especially children who tend to be even more embarrassed by the fact that they live in public housing, that to me fosters violence, anger, lack of education, and just it really doesn't promote a good, safe living for people. Everybody should be proud of where they live. Everybody should be given an opportunity to grow. Everybody should be given an opportunity to afford a home if they want to buy one. So that's why I say it should just be a bridge. While they're in public housing, there should be social services provided to them, and it should be mandatory that they take these services so that they know how to manage their money, notice how to manage a bank account, how to keep a property clean. And I'm not saying that everybody lives in public housing, doesn't keep a clean house. I don't want that to be taken out of context. But I really believe that we could do a lot more in public housing to support people and give them an opportunity to have the same advantages that some of us have.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson?
Yes, I agree with a lot of what she just said. I've been at 1923 Bellevue for, oh God, since '83. And I've watched my neighborhood go from 80% ownership to 80% rental. So you're right, when people own, they respect. When the kids feel that their parents are respected, they act respectful. But I've never been one to blame the victim. So in this case, my approach would be, where does this Section 8 money go? Who are these people? Why does a slumlord even exist? That's accountability. Millions and millions of dollars go to these people, you know, who 9 times out of 10 don't live in the city. You know, shuck, I had some guy buy a house down for me who lived in Arizona. You know, zero accountability is what creates these problems. So if they come in here thinking, wait a minute, this is a tough sheet if I want to rent and be a landlord in Harrisburg. This is some tough stuff to follow. And they move on. Go somewhere where they can get away with that madness. But yeah, it floats down to the children. Because if you got a landlord, and I've had a couple in my community who refuse to fix stuff, you know, still want their money. It doesn't matter if that woman or that man or that family's paying the Section 8 rate and the landlord's getting that bulk of that money. There's no reason for your place to be falling down. It's just not, you know? Maybe we ought to make the process a little tougher to come in here and buy a property. I get 6 or 7 offers a day to buy my house. And I think the 500-pound gorilla in the room is investors who drive up the price of housing. You know? They milked the corporations for what they could in 08 and 09. Now they come for the little houses, the small communities. I watched it happen in Chicago with just the parking. To me, sitting here watching this, and I've been to Germany, Greece, Spain, Turkey, and to watch Wall Street target our communities and then flood it in that time period with zero interest dollars. How can the average American compete with that? When these corporations and these investors are borrowing money at zero rate and then coming up and buying whole communities. I hop in my car and I drive down 6th Street. Totally different. And I don't mind progress. But when you destroy these children as children, they don't get to learn how to put in pipe. They don't get to learn how to do concrete. You know? So yeah, it starts in the home. It starts with them having a decent place to grow up. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions. I'm going to now open the floor for my colleagues to ask any questions they may have of the two of you. I'll begin with our Building and Housing Committee Chair, Councilwoman Davis. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, President Bowers. Yes, I do, and thank you both for being here today. What are you going to do, Ms. Gloria, to help to promote home ownership between social services and the public housing.
Between social services and public housing, well, you know, social services would be talking about health and welfare of people, and they're always ready to partner. So it's really just as easy to ask, and they will come and be happy to implement the types of programs that are needed in public housing. So, you know, when I was a chief operating officer with Hamilton Health Center, you know, we had a facility over there in South Harrisburg, and it was the best thing we could have done because it gave access. Access is always key to whether or not people can get affordable health care, whether they bring their children and to preventative health care to get their shots on time and all of the, it's easy to ask. I was director of public health programs for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which was the largest bureau in the health department. I had all disease areas except HIV/AIDS. And I'm gonna tell you, anytime they need help over there in, or any of the 9 places where they deal with public housing, they will be there to do that. And so will UPMC, Pinnacle, and other entities. So you need that because we have a lot of mental health issues. We have families that have children that are troubled. Our children don't always need to be medicated. Because I'm not hot on that, okay? But they need to be taught. Families need to be taught how to take care of themselves health-wise. If that's the social service part you're talking about, the other option for public housing is to bring in entities like the Department of Public Welfare that offer certain programs. Once again, not to keep people dependent on systems, but to give them a bridge so they know where to go to get help so they can establish themselves.
Thank you. So I know that you will be in that position and you will help, you will be an advocate for some of those programs.
Well,
to
if
make
I'm
sure
not
that
an
they're
advocate, I should step
implemented.
down.
Thank you very much for your service.
You're welcome.
I don't have any other questions. No questions for you, Mr. Jackson.
I'd like to just reiterate what she talked
Go
about.
right ahead.
And that's very important. Wraparound services to me is the key. You know, because when I was the PTA president of SciTech, we implemented the advocacy program where that person in the school worked in the school half a day and then went out to the community for half a day. You know, so yeah, I mean, it makes a difference when you know why children are being traumatized. When you have an adult there, you know, in the room.
Thank you. No further questions for me.
Thank you. I just wanted to note the Department of Public Welfare is now the Department of Human Services.
I know that.
Just for everybody's
Yeah.
reference.
But they still
Councilman-
do the same thing.
Yes, it's still the same. I just didn't want anyone to
Right.
think,
Exactly.
get confused about the work that they do. Councilman Jones, any questions?
Not so much any questions. I think my questions have been answered in your willingness to serve and what, I mean, why that you wanted to serve. But I will say to both of you, thank you. I have known you both for some time and just didn't know your resumes were so impeccable. But I do appreciate you guys, the willingness to come out and serve, because we do need good people, good vanguards in these positions to ensure that fairness across the board for our community and making sure that there is that level of accountability that you spoke of. So that's all I wanted to say to you both. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Rawls, any questions?
Thank you, President Bowers, and good evening to you both again. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for being willing to serve and volunteer your time to such an important part of our city that's not talked about a lot, but it has a big part and it plays a big role in what our city is to become, especially when it comes to housing, and something that you both so kindly pointed out, but respectfully too, is the part of opportunities, right? If we're not given the opportunities, how can we lay that pipe down? How can we learn to do the concrete? How can we learn to take care of our house? And so I think that's a big piece that's missing in our community. It's kind of went away, is giving residents the opportunities to do those things, but more importantly, have the knowledge and teaching to do them, right? Because everybody, you don't know what you don't know. So if you show me and if you put something out for me, then I can learn. But I also need to be taught so that I can. So you all beautifully, laid that out. I think you all have tremendous experience with the community, with housing, with the slum landlords that are created, right? Because if you don't have regulations, if they're not held accountable, they are going to do whatever they want to. But if you make it hard for them to come into a community and let it down, then they do walk away. I don't want to deal with all of that. And then you get good people and good landlords who care about their residents. So I just wanted to thank you both and just make that comment, because you all so nicely put that. The experience that you all have is truly unmatched, and I can see how you would both be a great fit on the board. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Green, any questions?
Thank you, President Bowers. Thank you both for being here tonight. I apologize for my brief tardiness. I was running a little behind, so please do accept my apologies. I don't have many questions. I guess the first is, since we're talking about HHA, if you could both, whoever goes first, just tell me a little bit about how much do you know about the Choice Neighborhood Grant that Harrisburg Housing, HHA and Harrisburg City have partnered together to get, because that's a current grant that's going on that deals with the redesign of some of the public housing that Harrisburg Housing Authority has. So if you could just tell me a little bit of knowledge about that, any involvement that you've had with it, and then how you expect to get the community to really be a part of it.
Well, I just started yesterday, and so I'm learning about that as we speak. I've had meetings all day yesterday, all day today. This is a concept that's been used in other states, so it isn't foreign to me. But you're right, it's getting the community buy-in to understand that this is a better way to provide housing to people who struggle. And I think that I don't believe any person is an island, so I believe that we need people to come to the table, including the community, in a proactive way, and look at this plan so that people are comfortable with it and they can support it. And it has to also involve residents that are living in public housing, because nobody knows what that looks like unless you live there. And some people have wonderful stories about living in public housing. Look, I grew up with folks that lived in public housing that turned out to be great people, NFL coaches, doctors, lawyers, and so forth. But in today's time, which has changed somewhat, you have to bring people to the table. So I would be advocating for that before the final lines are drawn, if you will, to make sure that that process has taken place to involve the public, and then we proceed. I'm learning about how detailed it is now, so probably by the end of the week I'll have it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it at all, so I'll be definitely a pair of fresh eyes.
All right, well, I appreciate that. We always need fresh eyes. Just kind of as a little bit of an overview, Harrisburg Housing Authority, in conjunction with Harrisburg City, did receive a federal grant to be able to do the redesign phase as a neighborhood choice grant. To do the redesign phase, I believe their main focus is Hoover Homes, but it also encompasses Hall Manor and the community in that area. Right now, they're about a year into the grant, I want to say, and they're kind of in the final design phases. And it's always concerned me about how much community involvement isn't there. I did speak with them, and they're doing some community outreach, but they always need some more advocates to really help get the word out there and get people involved and making sure that we're touching everyone and really getting that different perspective. The next step would be to then apply for the funding to actually implement the design. And of course, that's a big step, but it's important for us to make sure we have those advocates and those people in our community to make sure that they're a part of it and that the city is a part of it, because it's a big impact to the city as a whole, not just in South Harrisburg,
Absolutely.
but the city as a whole, because Harrisburg's not the biggest city around, so everybody knows someone that lives in every part of the city. So, and then this is more to the administration. Do we know the makeup of the board itself as to how many people on the board currently live in or near public housing? Because I think that's really important too. We don't want everybody like living in the more expensive parts of the city and making the decisions for Harrisburg housing.
I know they are all city residents, that's all I know.
Okay, if you could just get me that information, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. That's all I have, and thank you again for your willingness to serve. We need this in every capacity. We have lots of board openings, so anyone who's listening that would like to be a member of the city by helping out on some of these boards, it's a volunteer activity, but it plays a really big role in the future of the city, so thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Daniels, any questions?
Yes, if you could both please elaborate on your potential conflicts of interest. I know you already kind of answered one as it related to the city, but are there any other areas of
I
conflicts
don't
of
believe I
interest?
have any.
Repeat that, please?
Any areas of conflicts of interest?
No.
And then just two comments. First, I just want to remind folks that public housing is housing of last resort, which means if those individuals don't have it, the next step is homelessness. And I want to remind folks that we do have a growing unhoused population, which also adds pressure to our ESG funding and source of income. So, hopefully with your job currently, right, we create the economic environment where people can raise their income out of public housing rather than try to reduce the number of people who use it. We're in a really difficult economic times right now, and the approach should be to make it easier for people to get out of public housing in a healthy way rather than just simply reducing the numbers. And the other part is, as you know, the housing quality standards are actually higher than the city's building code. So if anyone ever sees a property that they feel is in disrepair, they just need to call the housing authority and report that landlord, because they're much more diligent about following through on those complaints. Because we have a lot of the slumlords we have are actually in the private sector. So also report those to the city building and housing department when they are from the private sector too. And that's
May
it
I
for me.
make just
Thank you.
one comment? Because public housing is not always housing of last resort.
It is. It's
Sometimes it's
definitionally
only
what it
the
is.
resort. It's the only option
Yeah.
that people have.
No, but legally that is what it is. I mean, that is what it is. It's not, it's not luxury apartments. It's not, people having.
Yeah.
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 It is. So when we make decisions about cutting, we always forget in conversation that when we cut or try to eliminate, what we're saying is these number of individuals deserve to be unhoused, and that's not what we should be looking for. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Davis, you have another question?
Just a statement. Thank you, President Bowers. I am very pleased to see you both here and willing to do the work. I have had tenants that are, well, on Section 8, we mentioned that. And there is a big need for teaching and additional support, because I know they do have support, but additional support. And in order to get them to the next phase of home ownership. I like to see that also, so keep me in the loop, and if there's anything that I can do to help those transition to home ownership, that's my passion too, to see those things happen. So thank you again for all of the work you've done in our community and for your service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to also acknowledge the presence of Ms. Sheila Bennett, who is also a current board member. Wasn't sure if you had any comments to share before we move on, or?
I am just going to say Thank you, Madam Chair and Vice, and all the rest of the city council members. I'm asking for your vote of yes for Miss Gloria Martin Payne and Zach to come on the board. We have a board of 3 with 2 seats need to be filled. Exactly what Ms. Gloria and Zach are stating, that's the direction that we need to take. Harrisburg Housing Authority, in that direction, caring more for our kids that are in our facilities and buildings, trying to teach the parents, like you said, home ownership, getting them more engaged. The city of Philadelphia, we went and visited their authority, and they have so many social services that are available to anyone that is living in their communities. They are not missing the beat. Any housing buildings that are dilapidated, that have been run down, they are acting on it, getting their hands on it, and building more affordable housing. And I think that's what we should be doing in the city of Harrisburg also. So, thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then one other thing also. With Harrisburg Housing Authority, we also deal in like contracts with businesses. You know, I'm looking to push forward. We need more MBE, WBE participation. We need that as far as like construction, any type of work that the Harrisburg Housing Authority needs, like lawn services, securing some of the senior buildings. We need more MBE and WBE participation. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thanks for your presence this evening. I move to add Resolution 28 of 2024 and Resolution 29 of 2024 to our next legislative session agenda. I did want to note that the majority of the board and commission appointments are made on behalf of the mayor. City council has a few, which we've made, and some we've exhausted our ability to make the appointments. So if somebody is interested, I would recommend following up with the mayor's office directly and sharing your resume and perhaps the board or commission of interest. I just wanted to note that. Thank you. But thank you for being here, and this concludes the work of the Administration Committee. The next committee you will hear from will be the Building and Housing Committee. I will defer to our Building and Housing Committee Chair, Councilwoman Davis.
Thank you, President Bowers. Okay, Mr. Parker. Could
Yes,
you
I will.
read this resolution into the record, please?
Certainly. Resolution 39 of 2024. A resolution to consider the application for a certificate of appropriateness to demolish the property and expand the surface lot located at 1511 North Front Street, Harrisburg, PA, which the City of Harrisburg's Historical Architectural Review Board recommends be denied.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Okay, I think we have the owner of 1511 North Front Street attorney here, representative. Can you please tell us your name, your full name and position?
Sure. My name is Esh McCombie. I'm an attorney with McNeese, Wallace, and Nurick down on Pine Street.
Thank you. And whenever you're ready, you can go ahead with your presentation this evening.
Thank you. Again, my name is Esh McCombie. With me this evening, to my left are Tyler Stockholm with EI Associates. The applicant's firm, Mark Karowski with K&W Engineers, and Sean Fitzsimmons with Landmark Commercial Realty. We represent EI Associates and 1515 North Front Street LLC, the owner of abutting properties at 1511 and 1515 North Front. The subject property tonight is 1511 North Front Street. The applicant submitted an application for a certificate of appropriateness to demolish that building pursuant to section 7-317.6 of the ordinance. Applicant and its professionals presented that to the Historic Architectural Review Board, which, as was noted, recommended denial. So for the sake of brevity, I'll be the only presenter tonight, but we have the other professionals available should council have any specific questions for them. Are there any questions for me before I get started?
No, not yet. You can go ahead with your presentation, and then we'll ask questions after you're finished. Thank you, Mr. Parker.
So page one that you have in front of you is an aerial image. The red marker on the left shows the property. It's along North Front Street between Harris Street and Riley. Generally a residential neighborhood with a few small offices and a few buildings that have been converted from residential to office over the years. I'm going to turn to the next page, please, page 2. The blue outline is the property. Property is in the city's historic overlay district, referred to as the Old Uptown District. Old Uptown generally consists of Queen Anne and Italianate, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, architecture.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Can you please speak either closer to the
Oh,
microphone or switch microphones?
Is that better?
I think so. Thank you.
Okay. I'll try to lean forward. The second one is aerial with the city overlay. Properties in the city's historic overlay district, referred to as the Old Uptown District. Old Uptown generally consists of Queen Anne and Italianate architecture. Most of it was constructed in the 19th century or very early 20th century. The building itself that we're talking about was built in 1957, so a few decades later than most of the buildings that are part of that district. If you turn to the third page, please, it's an aerial with a national overlay. So although the property's in the city's historic overlay, it's outside what has been designated as part of the National Historic District, which is the black outlined area that's slightly shaded. It's a little difficult to make out, but you can see it's kind of more inland from the river. Go to page 4, please. This is a street view of the property. 1511 is the building on the right with the little blue marker on it. It's the taller of the two buildings that's there. 1515 is the other building. 1511 is a knockoff of the international style of architecture from the 1920s and the 1930s. So it's a little inconsistent with the rest of the overlay district. Page 5 gives you a look of what else is on this area of North Front Street. So here we're looking up. You see Riverview Manor and residential style buildings, several of which were built during the period I was discussing, and some of which are examples of the architecture of that era. I think it's also notable that several of the properties in this area have landscaping out front or other architectural improvements to create a more attractive and aesthetic streetscape. Page 6 is just looking down the other direction, so now we're looking south down North Front Street. Right next door to the property is the Automotive Dealers Association. Beyond that are residential structures that are similar in style and in age as the ones to the north. And again, as you look south, most of those properties have landscaping of some sort in their front yard. So now if you go to page 7, we're zeroing in on the property a little bit more. This shows the existing conditions. It was prepared by K&W Engineers. the existing conditions for 1511 and 1515 North Front Street. Both properties have been vacant for over 20 months at this point, despite applicants' best efforts to lease those. As was explained in our letter to council, we thought we had a medical clinic as a tenant for 1515, but they recently backed out. They determined that the rent was too high, and we could not confirm for them that they would have the amount of parking that they wanted. They wanted 22 spaces, but 1511 and 1515 combined have just 18 spaces. So the potential tenant that we had at 1515 has backed out. We think 1515 is still leasable, but 1511, the subject of this application, is not. 1511 is 2 floors, but the second floor only has 7-foot high ceiling elevations on the second floor. There's no elevator. It's generally outdated. We've seen that it cannot be leased as is, and the cost to bring it up to today's standards exceeds the value of the building. It has no utility at this point. Moreover, as shown on the existing conditions plan, there are several nonconformities between the two properties that we would like to address by demolishing 1511 and consolidating the properties. And I'll just point out a few of them. You can see the lot line coming down in the middle. Currently, it crosses through several of the parking spaces. So there's parking for 1515 and 1511 on opposite lots. Together, the two buildings total about 9,500 square feet. They would require 19.6 parking spaces. The property only has 18 parking spaces available. The parking spaces that are there are also non-compliant. They're only 8.5 feet wide when the ordinance requires 9 feet wide. Similarly, the drive aisles are too narrow. I think they're 14 to 18 feet when I believe the ordinance requires closer to 20 feet. So the idea with all this then is that applicant would like to demolish the smaller building, the one on the right, 1511, consolidate the property, reconfigure the parking, add some additional parking spaces back where the building is currently. If you look at the bottom of the existing conditions plan, you can see that right now there are portions of 4 parking spaces that force the sidewalk out towards the road. The sidewalk kind of bends around the parking spaces. That shouldn't be how this is set up. We would like to straighten that out, put landscaping in there so it's consistent with the other properties along the street, and so that the landscaping also provides a bit of a screen for the parking lot. Right now, the parking lot is unscreened and is not aesthetically pleasing in any way from Front Street. And so the final page then, page 8, are the proposed conditions or the proposed site plan. You can see here that the property would be consolidated. 1511 would be demolished. Parking spaces would be added. This shows 22 off-street parking spaces on one lot. They would be compliant in terms of width. They'd be compliant in terms of ADA requirements. They would be compliant in terms of drive aisles for accessibility. Shown on the bottom of the page is the proposed landscaping that I was describing. It's on either side of the ingress and egress, the circles that look like trees and shrubs looking down from above. And so we feel this is an upgrade to the aesthetics along North Front Street, which is why we brought this to HARB for their consideration. The HARB regulations or the zoning ordinance require that council consider certain criteria when looking at this. Those are found in section 317.10A and B. 10A directs council to consider the effect of the proposed change on the general historic and architectural nature of the building and district, to consider the appropriateness of the exterior architectural features which can be seen from a public street, and to consider the general design, arrangement, texture, and material of the building in relation to other buildings in the district. So as I explained before, 1511 North Front is inconsistent with the historic and the architectural character of this district. It's a knockoff of an international style of design. The international style of design is not consistent in and of itself with the district. And to make matters worse, this is merely a knockoff of it. It was built decades after. The building is out of place. And in addition, it's one of few properties that has no landscaping along Front Street. But after the building is demolished, parking can be added and reconfigured to allow landscaping along the front. The other section that matters here is 31710B, which essentially directs council to consider the demolition criteria of the HARB guidelines. There are 6 of them, and I'll try to get through them pretty quickly here. Number 1, what is the existing condition of the structure? The existing condition is that it's been vacant for 20 months. It's outdated, it's economically unusable, and it's without commercial utility because the second story is only 7 feet in height and it's got no elevator. Number 2, is it on the National Register or architecturally or historically significant to the historic district? First, it is not on the National Register. And second, as I've been explaining throughout the presentation, it's not architecturally significant. And to the applicant's knowledge, it's not historically significant. Nothing of import has occurred there, and no owner of any historic import has owned the property. Number 3, is the structure a design or historic intrusion? In our opinion, it's both. The guidelines describe a design intrusion as being inconsistent with the design of the other buildings in the district. I've already explained that piece. The historic intrusion is because it's not built at the same period as the other buildings in the district and has no historic significance. Presumably, that's why it was excluded from the National Register when we took all those properties through that process. Number 4, what is the structure's contribution to the streetscape and street design? In our opinion, it's nothing. Right now it detracts. That's part of the reason why we want to demolish it, put screening, put landscaping in front of it, so that we're blocking the view of the parking lot that right now is just wide open to the street. Number 5, what type and quality of development is being proposed to take the place of the demolished structure? You know, admittedly, a parking lot is not what we would all prefer to have there. I get that. But the applicant is not in a position to demolish both buildings, buy other buildings on the lot, and build something new and beautiful that everybody can use. At this point, we're trying to mitigate what is already there. The property can't be leased. It's too expensive to renovate the property. And so the idea is to demolish the building, put up landscaping to at least make Front Street a little more aesthetically pleasing when you're going by, and to hopefully increase the value of 1515 by providing additional parking so that we can get that property leased. As I said, one of the reasons the tenant that we thought we had left was because we weren't able to confirm for them the amount of parking. Lastly, number 6, what alternatives are there to demolition? So I think it's clear to us at this point that 1511 is not leasable. If it's not demolished, it will continue to sit vacant. Eventually, the property owner is going to have to go and appeal the value of the property, and it will sit there until, you know, it falls down on its own accord. As to 1515, it's salvageable, and we're trying to salvage it at this point. If 1511 continues to sit vacant, that draws down the value, that draws down the leasability of 1515. And so at some point, the applicant may also then be required to go and request a reduction in the value of that property from a property tax standpoint. So again, we know parking lot is not what everyone wants, but it's better than what's there now. And I think it's better than what could happen in the future if the properties continue as they are. We believe an analysis of the criteria that I laid out before you lends itself to approval. And so we ask that council approve the application for the certificate of appropriateness to permit the applicant to demolish 1511 North Front Street, conditioned on applicant advancing a subdivision plan that is consistent with what was provided in our application, and conditioned upon applicant modifying the parking and adding landscaping and screening in a manner that's consistent with what was depicted in the application. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. We have the civil engineer, we have the architect, and we have the commercial broker here as well to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Mr. Knight, did you want to speak?
I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have about the board's deliberations or the planning bureau's case report or why they made the decision they did. I think, you know, I don't want to necessarily speak for the board and put words in their mouth. Their thoughts are in the resolution through the discussion at the meeting. But I think some of these issues that the applicants have brought up about, you know, we do disagree with these. You know, the applicants have made a lot of assertions to buildings not being structurally or financially viable, yet provided no documentation at the HARB meeting to justify this. Nothing to say this is going to require $1 million to fix up and the property's worth $200,000. So if they do have that, then that's something that maybe needs to go back before the board and to allow them to review more information. But that was not provided with the initial submission. The applicants have implied that the existing structures are not consistent with like the streetscape or the district, but historic districts are not just they're not just buildings and blocks frozen in amber from one specific time. They're changing and evolving things because they're in a you know, a city that's constantly, the needs are changing. There are different structures throughout the historic districts built at different times. It's not just this property was built between 1910 and 1920, and only those properties built during that time are considered, you know, relevant to the historic district. As I'm sure all of the city council members know, if you go up and down Front Street, you see many types of these buildings. You see new historic building or new commercial buildings intermixed with older buildings. You know, to the point, to the applicant's point about the properties not being a national historic district and thus being a recognition of their limited value, I would just note on the map that he provided, the adjacent Riverview Manor is not in the National Historic District either. That does not imply that that property is either not historic or not contributory to the district itself. I think ultimately, though, what it really comes down to is that this proposal is for the demolition of a structure for parking. I would, you know, in my opinion, driving down Front Street or even in some of maybe parts of Second Street, the worst parts of these historic districts are the ones where structures have been demolished for surface parking. And that was, maybe there was a reason for that back in the time. Maybe it was just, I guess, oversights on the government at that time. But to imply that the removal of a building that creates a consistent streetscape along Front Street here and the construction of a parking lot is somehow an improvement over existing condition is, frankly, I don't think an argument with merit. During my 11 and a half years here with the city, to my knowledge, we've only ever approved one demolition permit for 1512 and 1514 North 2nd Street. And that was several years ago. But during that discussion, one of the only reasons it was approved is because there was a pending development project with it. So it was not approved and just being allowed to sit as a vacant lot. In fact, one of the conditions of that approval was that the property not be used for parking even temporarily, because we know that what happens with parking, when you demolish a structure and put down parking, it's very rare that that ever gets redeveloped here in the city. And so, you know, tearing down a building is really a last resort in a historic district, because that goes away, you know, it goes away completely. You cannot rebuild a historic building in a way that retains its historicness. And so, you know, really, if the applicants were proposing to demolish the building and build something new, there would be some consideration there of saying, okay, we see that, you know, this building is infeasible or not maximizing the value of this property, but that's not what's being done here. And I think, you know, the applicants do understand the value of riverfront property. As city council may be aware, you know, they came to city a couple years ago about a new development up on North Front Street, and it was a really nice development. So they understood that, you know, this, and I think they testified during that meeting that these are great views of the river. And while I would say that these buildings themselves are, not as nice as what they were planning to build there, they still have these views of the river. And so, I mean, without any sort of documentation that these are unleasable, or again, these are financially or structurally unviable buildings, I don't think that the Historic Review Board would lend credence to just testimony to that effect. And so, the Planning Bureau supports the board's recommendation to deny this. There are standards in the National Park Service preservation briefs for mothballing structures, for taking structures that maybe have a temporary vacancy and a current owner doesn't necessarily know what to do with it, and putting it on hold, for lack of a better word, until they're able to find a viable reuse or a viable tenant. And we would at least like to see that aspect pursued maybe a little bit more than just saying, well, we waited for a year and a half and now we can't find a tenant, so we want to demo this building and just build parking. The final thing I would bring up, and I mentioned this during our HARB meeting as well, is that the applicant has indicated that there's 18 spaces there now. I think there's actually 19 when you look at the site plan of the existing properties. But as part of their project, they're proposing to build a connection to the adjacent property at, I think, 1500 North 2nd Street, which is also owned by the applicant. That driveway connection will result in the removal of 3 spaces. So while there's about 19 spaces there now, maybe 18, and they're telling you that there's going to be 22, which implies that there's going to be an increase of 6 spaces, they're actually going to be losing 3 spaces from the adjacent property. And if the applicant's tenants are really looking for parking, then it would seem to me that they apparently have 3 spaces to give at this adjacent property, and they could lease spaces to them at that property instead of demolishing a building and building a surface parking lot. So that's kind of the Planning Bureau's perspective and stance on the issue. And again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Knight. I have a few questions, Mr. Ish, and then I'll open it up to my colleagues.
Sure.
Okay. How long has the owner owned these 2 properties at 1511 and 1515 North Front Street?
1511 he's owned since 2006-ish, around there, 2000, 2006. 2000 or 1515, I'm not sure how long he's owned that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So 20 years, 25 years, give or take.
Okay. And do you know when he purchased, I think it's Mr. Cipriano is the owner, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, it's an ownership group, so he is a member of the ownership group of these 2 properties. Mr. Knight referenced the property to the rear. He is also a member of that ownership group, but it's a different group. It's not the same, he's in both, but the other people in the groups aren't the same.
Okay, so, excuse me, this property at 1511 North Front was bought in 2006. Whenever he purchased, or whenever they purchased the property, I'm wondering if they were aware of the building being a historic building, and the City of Harrisburg ordinance passed, which looks like it wasn't passed till 2008, that a proposed demolition of a historic building is associated with construction of a new building.
I can't answer that question. I can just say if they bought it before the ordinance was in place, they probably didn't know about it. And I believe that there are 2 different provisions. There's one provision that requires a new building when you're demolishing, and then there's another one for just demolishing, and we are going under the provision for just demolishing.
Okay, so in 2006, there wasn't any research done in terms of this building being a historic building, and, what could happen if the owners decided to demolish the building, and there wasn't any information presented to them.
Not to my
That you're
knowledge.
aware of.
They
Okay.
were able to own and lease the building for many years. I think COVID changes a lot of things, and the market for everything kind of changed after that. And so the ability to lease Class C, Class D office space has kind of plummeted since COVID. And so I think they've struggled to lease the property since then.
Have they considered saving or applying for any grants to help remodel 1511 to preserve it and make it more available for use and to make it more lucrative?
Yeah, I know they've looked into different options. I do a lot of land use work. I'm not aware of any grants that would fit the bill for a private redevelopment of a business use like this. But I can certainly ask them about that.
Okay. And lastly, by demolishing the building and restructuring the parking lot, and you already mentioned that the owner or the health clinic that was supposed to occupy 1515 is not interested anymore. Has the owner or owners talked about possibly renting those parking spaces?
The tenant backed out just over the last couple days.
Right.
So there hasn't been anything looked at. We wanted to come to this meeting first, get a feel for what council was thinking. But no, they haven't pivoted yet to start going down other paths.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering if they were thinking ahead and thinking that if this other outfit didn't work out, they could possibly rent those spaces out. And those
Got it.
other spaces behind 1511, is that where the vet center is?
No, that's for the large, if you look on the first page, the aerial. Yeah, the vet center, yep.
Okay, so it is
It's
the
right,
vet
it's
center.
it's that one.
Okay,
And like I said, that one is, Mr. Cipriani is a member of that ownership group, but the ownership group is not the same as the ownership for the other buildings.
okay. And so just so that I understand, if this building is demolished, there are going to be additional spaces connected to the vet center.
Yeah, so if this, if you look on the very last page of the packet, if this building is demolished, where the building currently sits, would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 new spaces. And that drive aisle, because it's not wide enough to go both directions, that drive aisle would continue into the vet center parking lot. And then people could exit that way. So that way, those that are parking in the front have the option to go to Front Street or out the back to Riley or one of the side streets.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you
I
for your
will
questions.
open the platform up for questions, and I will start to my immediate right with Councilwoman Daniels.
Sure. So in addition to the parking lot being an accessory to the 1515 building, were there thoughts about the parking spaces being commercial parking spaces?
You mean for lease?
Yeah.
Like I said, we have not gotten that far. I just found out about the tenant backing out yesterday. So it's very fresh. So, you know, there has not been a pivot to think of new options yet.
And
And then I wanted to ask, like, or how close to the line?
so I have to look, but I am pretty sure a commercial lot would not be permissible under city code there. That's not to say they couldn't lease the entire lot. You know, that is, but renting parking spaces out like a commercial lot would be a problem.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear on that. And could you go through again the timeline? Because I am pretty sure I've seen people come out of those buildings like relatively recently, but you said the 1511 has been vacant for 20 months?
20 months, yep. I'm sure there have been people going through, looking at the buildings, you know, for those reasons, but the information that I was provided is that they have been unleased for 20 months.
Who was the tenant before? Was it the Youth Advocate?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And so where were these properties advertised? Like, so you have one tenant that kind of bailed on
Correct.
you,
We've
but
been marketing them with Landmark Commercial Realty for the last 20 months. I have the whole portfolio of Mr. Cipriano's buildings up and down Front Street. He owns quite a few. We've taken plenty of tenants through these buildings, and we repeatedly get the same answers. 1511 is not viable. They can't use, the ceilings are too short upstairs. It's very built out, small, very small offices downstairs, and there's no real place to put an elevator, nor would it be cost effective to put an elevator in that building. And that's what we keep getting. So we've actually had tenants come down there, and we've done deals with them in other buildings and properties that he owns. The other thing, and the real main concern here, what I think we need to think about is, we're adding parking, but we're making the parking much more efficient. If you've ever seen that parking lot full, it is very packed. It's very hard to get in and out of. And as Ash said earlier, the drive lanes are extremely small. If you have a big vehicle in there, there's a good chance you might be stuck until somebody moves, a car to get you out, or vice versa. So I don't think it's just knocking a building down to create additional parking. It's also to create parking that's much more efficient for the property itself. Yes, it'll give us some more spots, but it makes 1515 more viable, because that's the other problem that we have is the parking. We have 18 or 19 spots in the front there, but they're really not 18 or 19 spots. If you look at how they're configured, size of the vehicles and other things that'll be in that lot, you don't get the efficiency. You don't really get the 18 or 19 spots. And that was a major concern with the lot. In fact, we did have a health clinic looking at it, but we're also in a letter of intent right now with UPMC for pediatrics unit. They looked at the building also. That was their main concern. Their major thing, they saw no value in 1511. 1515 could work for them, but the parking situation was just completely not going to fit the bill for them.
Okay, and I'm kind of used to this isn't a large commercial building, but it is not a small one. Kind of having multiple tenants. So why wouldn't you be able to lease out just the bottom if that seems to be the one that's functional, and use the second floor as something else?
If you put two tenants in that building that weren't together, coexisting tenants.
Just having like one tenant that could use the bottom.
Well, then you're not maximizing the building to begin with. But I think also, if you have two separate tenants, so if we put one tenant in the first floor of 1511, 1515, and we're sharing a parking lot there, you're running into problems. There's no way around it. Especially if they're not, it worked when Youth Advocate was there because they had both buildings. Now, if you put two separate tenants in that property, it's gonna be causing some problems with the parking, and there's no question about that.
But if you're just using the bottom, you have probably fewer work. This could be a place that has a lot of workers or very few workers. I don't know what businesses would be there. So, because some of the parking lot issues are really, you just need to, you could just repaint. Because the other question is, if the building is demolished, that turns into parking lot, which means more surface area.
It's already 100% impervious, so there wouldn't be any more, and I think, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, the impervious going to decrease because we're actually applying some additional grass area. In fact, we're moving the building by the parking area.
I can repeat it for him. So there is more impervious coverage on the property now than there would be once the building is demolished and the parking lot is put in, because we would be adding pervious or grass areas to the property.
But that just seems pretty limited to like that, to the
Yeah, I
Street,
guess
right?
your question was, would it increase? And the answer is no, it would decrease.
That's correct.
But just very like.
Yeah, but
not
it wouldn't.
it's not going to be.
Not negligible, but not going up, for sure.
Just something to consider is there's the ordinance that requires a certain number of spots, and then there's the marketability piece of the tenant wanting that number of spots. And that was the total spots for the property. Whereas if you have a tenant in both buildings, they're both wanting that same amount of spaces. So we're talking about just one of the buildings needing all of those spaces versus two buildings, tenants. just
Well, I mean, I think
something to
it-
consider.
Yes, I think I would have kind of like to see like what businesses you're looking at, because I think, right, these spaces could be used by, like I said, a business that has a lot of employees or a lot of clients, or a business that has very few, and especially if you have a lot of workers who live right around there, right? They could just walk to work and you don't even. So it would be great to see an analysis of what kind of business you think you'll be least.
Yeah, I
like
think
what
it's-
businesses are completely excluded from being able to use the space.
Yeah, I
Because
think it's
the-
been open. It has not been a limited, we're focusing on this type of use
Right,
for
but
a
I would like to
tenant.
see what's excluded, because I want to see what's the loss in customer base, in tenant base that you don't have, right? Like
Okay.
who, and then because if, I don't know, if you lose out on beef processing tenants, right, that's not a loss because that can't process. The cows can't fit in there.
Right.
But if you're losing a lot of tenants who are in tech, maybe, right, then maybe that's a really big loss of use.
Yep.
So it would be great to see, have some kind of sense of what it is, what value has been lost. Because I think I've driven through that parking lot. I understand the logistics of it. It's kind of annoying, but it's fixable with paint as it is right now.
It is, and Sean, I'll let you talk a little bit about the types of tenants, but the two properties already don't have enough parking under the zoning code. And so for us to repaint and paint with the right size, we would be reducing the parking further. So whether it's 18 or 19 spaces now, when you reconfigure and make the widths correct, I don't know, I'm not gonna guess what you're going down to, but you're going down to something. And so we would have to go to the zoning hearing board and go get a variance. And if anybody has been to the zoning hearing board, reducing parking is not generally looked all that favorably upon, in my experience at least, with the zoning hearing board. For uses like this, we've been able to do it with affordable housing. We've been able to do it with multifamily housing. But I don't know what arguments we would have to be able to reduce parking simply because we want to redraw the lot lines. I think the feedback would be, you've got 18 spaces there now, why don't you just leave it the way it is and use those 18 or 19 spaces? So I think you're right, we could redraw it and make it more user-friendly, but in doing so, we would end up losing parking spaces.
And could I interject for a second? The applicant's implication that this property doesn't have enough parking, or that redrawing parking would cause them to go back to the zoning hearing board is actually not necessarily correct, because our parking regulations are based on the type of use and not the structure. So maybe for an office use, they might have to do it, but if the applicants had considered a different use that had different regulations for how the required off-street parking was determined, they might not have to do that. So I think really it kind of sounds like they're just saying office, 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 and if we can't find that, we have to demolish this. I mean, that's what I'm hearing, frankly, a lot of. And, I don't know whether, again, I don't know how much outreach they've done to other types of uses or something like that, but just because they're either reducing parking or retaining the same amount of parking does not require them to go to the zoning hearing board. I just want to make that clear.
Jeff's right, my analysis was based off of an office tenant, because the buildings are office buildings. But Sean, you might be able to talk about who's
No,
looked.
the buildings are office buildings, and that's who, the interest that we've had, any showings that we've had have all been professional office users and medical users. And those are the two, that have been focused. And quite honestly, those are the buildings that highest and best use it fits. I don't think, I can tell you that in the past few years since COVID, there's been a big transition from buildings. The A buildings that a lot of the owners and, the A-class buildings, the rents have gone down because they've had vacancy. So a lot of these, a lot of the tenants that are in the B and C buildings have been able to move into some A spaces, which have made these buildings much less desirable as well. I mean, if you can go get building, a space in a B building, really nice, has a nice parking field and everything's ready to go, you're gonna take that at the same rate as you can get, a C building for. You're gonna take that, or a D building, you're gonna take that and not think twice. And that's really what we've been experiencing also, is the buildings are dated. Times have changed in the world, and especially in the commercial real estate world and the office. And like I said before, I mean, we've had many different office type users come through there, medical users also. But the buildings are office buildings. I don't really see any, that's the use. You know, that's the highest and best use for these properties. And without, I mean, you know, I don't really know what else we would try to target, or what we could reconfigure them into outside of, you know, some type of office use, whether it be medical, professional, and there's a lot of different categories that can fall into that, but they're all office type uses.
Thank you, and that's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Council Vice President Green. Questions?
Thank you, Councilwoman Davis. A lot of my questions, Councilwoman Daniels did ask. So I guess mine is just more kind of like a comment.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of demolishing buildings for parking, because we have a parking issue in the city. So next we just start demolishing houses because we need more parking, right? It kind of just seems like more of a convenience and a necessity at this point. It doesn't seem like you really have went through what other options are available. That's just from what I'm hearing right now. And then also it's the evidence piece. I know you said that as far as renovating it, it's too high, it's too expensive. But right, without any evidence, it's just like you can say whatever you want to get what you want, right? So that would be kind of my take on it. I'd like to see some evidence to prove that that's actually the case, because I'm definitely not for demolishing a building for convenience of parking. So
Understood, Vice President Green, and we can get a cost estimate together and a building value, and try to get that submitted through Mr. Knight and Mr. Grover for council to look at, if that would be something of interest to all of you. And then, you know, I think you also ask about other options. And, you know, I think in our opinion, the cost estimate and building value will point out that there really is only the one option. And to Mr. Knight's comments about the streetscape, right, part of this is to increase the value overall. Because if we make the streetscape nicer, if we are able to push the parking back off the sidewalk, if we're able to put in landscaping, right, then that increases the value and the utility of 1515 and makes it more attractive so that somebody can come in and rent that and use it. I think right now, the way the property sits, there is no screening or buffer at all. So when you walk by, you are walking literally right beside the parked cars. It's wide open. There is nothing aesthetically pleasing or attractive with that streetscape. The idea here is to push the vehicles back so that we can landscape in the front, block the parking lot from view. And so yes, while we would be demolishing a building to add parking, that parking would be not visible or less visible because it would be behind landscaping as compared to the parking lot now. It's just wide open to the street.
thank you. And then I have one other question. It's two separate parcels right now, correct? It hasn't been consolidated. So why'd you choose to ask for the demolition before consolidating? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know if there's a good answer for that one, Vice President Green. I think the idea was these had been leased by one entity for several years, as Councilwoman Daniels pointed out. Once they left and they weren't able to be leased, we started looking at other options. And so whenever they said, hey, can we get rid of one building and add parking, we pointed out, the site engineer and myself pointed out that, well, you've got two different lots. You shouldn't have parking on two different lots. Let's consolidate them. So, you know, that's my general recollection of how it went down, but I don't know why he didn't say 15 years ago, you know, let's just consolidate these.
All right, thank you, that's all I have.
And just one more statement. The applicants did file a lot consolidation plan concurrent with the COA application, but we just hadn't processed it, awaiting a final determination on whether the property, because if the property wouldn't be, if the demolition is not approved, I don't know that they'd want to go forward with the lot consolidation. So we wanted to make sure it was following the appropriate order.
All right, that kind of answers my question. So it has already been filed, just not processed.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I just have one question before we move on. I thought I read something about a bike rack inherent within the streetscape or the parking lot.
It would be back towards the building.
Okay. Which building?
The 1515, the one that would remain.
Okay. All right, so like on the side, there on the edge? Okay. And which doesn't interfere, would not interfere with any of the parking spaces, I'm assuming?
No, it would be over near, I believe, near the ADA space that's visible to the left of that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
President Bowers, any questions?
I don't have any questions. Many of the questions that I had were asked and answered. I did just want to note, I guess for Mr. Knight, the Municipal Historic District Certificate of Appropriateness application, it still lists former Mayor Reed's name at the top. I didn't know if you were aware of that.
No, we haven't been given that out. I might, so a lot of
I
people.
figured that it was a dated document, but I just wanted to let you know for your reference.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of times, especially people who do a lot of submissions might just have an old version and they just keep submitting that. So that happens sometimes. But I'll make sure the most updated document is available on the website and is being distributed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Rawls.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Davis. I don't have a lot of questions and maybe like one comment. I just wanted to also get some clarity on a few things. Mr. Knight, exactly why did why did they deny the application? I heard a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that I was right before I asked my other question.
So the stated reasons for the denial in the resolution was that the applicant had not provided a justification for why a structure along a primary corridor in the city must be demolished for a net increase of no parking spaces. The proposal is out of conformance with the city's historic district design guidelines, the comprehensive plan, and the zoning code. Because the off-street parking requirements for office uses, presumably the use that is or will be occupying the property to the north, are based on square footage and the building is not being enlarged or expanded, there is no zoning rationale for the applicant reconfiguring the parking. The property and structure have no outstanding violations or condemnations that might be used as justification for the proposed demolition. So kind of referencing that earlier example I had provided about 1512 and 1514 or 2nd Street. If you all are familiar with that, like that has oriel windows that are potentially like falling into the street, that had been issued condemnation orders and placarded over decades. And so that kind of provided a justification, whereas that did not exist in this case. And then the adverse impacts on the urban design and architectural character of the Front Street corridor would be significant, as the building proposed for demolition was constructed as a pair with the building to the north, and will exacerbate the poor urban planning decisions that have resulted in the dedication of half a block of riverfront property within an historic district being devoted to parking.
Thank you very much. I wanted to make sure any residents who may not have been privy to get to that information knew exactly why it was denied. Because I did see that in the resolution, but I know everybody doesn't have the same things at home. So thank you. And you might have already said this, Mr. Eash, but I don't think so, because we were still needed some information on what other things that you all look at to do with the property other than demoing it, what other ideas that you had, just some more information. And I didn't hear this though, but how much would it have cost to demo? How much will it cost to demo it? Do you have that information?
We can get that for you.
Oh, you did. Oh, you didn't look at that before you decided to demo it?
I'm sure the applicant did. I don't have that information.
Okay.
Yeah, I can ask him for it.
Yes, please. I mean, I think that's important to know, to see why you came to that decision. And I think my only comment on this was it's very difficult for, first, we had the housing, for two members to come up for the Housing Authority, come up to be on the board. And the big part was, we are lacking in affordable housing or housing. So to demo a building and not looking at it as it can be something else, it's a difficult thing to say, let's demo it and add more parking in a place we don't need more parking there. And if it's not going to be used as housing, then did we think of an event place, somewhere to have events? That's something we also lack in the city, places for people to go have nice events at, or there's also something happening. I know in some places where you can rent out little spaces in offices where people may be doing nails or hair, and they can rent them for a day because maybe they can't afford a place within the city or somewhere else to have their business, but they can rent these little spots out for a time, like week or a month or whatnot, to try to get their self going within their business. I've seen little hubs like that in the suburbs. I'm sure we can do it in the city too. I think my whole point of that is just like revisioning it instead of just saying, well, let's tear it down for parking. Because my first thought was, well, do they need more parking for the vet center? You know, why is this being torn down and not, you know, looked at something new and something different? So I know for me, I would definitely want more information on how much is it going to cost to demo it? How much would it be for you to re-envision it in some different ways that would actually bring something to the community other than just more parking? So for me to make a sound decision, I would definitely need that information. So thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councilwoman Rawls. Councilman Jones, questions?
The benefit of going last. I feel like Judge Masters. You both presented a great case, and it's almost time to make a decision. No, but I just echo some of the sentiments that my colleagues have. Being a small business owner, not as big as you guys yet, but I understand the business side of it. And, you know, you purchase a property and the things that you want to do to get your return. So I get that. And I also got to understand the historic value in that area of the city of Harrisburg, and seeing other things, the necessity or the need for other things to be functionable in that area. So just to knock the building down again, I get that part of it. So for me, I would just like to get some more of the evidence to see what Mr. Knight was talking about. Reading this, though, I will say that you guys did a wonderful job, because if I didn't hear Mr. Knight, I was like, you guys have me at hello, all right? But I do want to always make sure I'm doing my due diligence and seeing what other things that you guys can bring to the table. Now, have you guys even looked to compromise? Is there a compromise?
Well, I don't know. Maybe just knock down the second floor. I don't know that there's a compromise between demolish and don't. But you know, I think that to some of the other comments up here, maybe looking at different uses, and if that involves something that requires a zoning relief, a variance, or something like that, that the Planning Bureau could lend its support to in a request before the zoning hearing board, you know, we'd be happy to do that. We're always happy to hear ideas from people, and you know, an event center, you know, small business incubator. Councilwoman Rawls was discussing, you know, something like that. You know, whether the building works, and you know, kind of in the applicant's defense too, there may be different building code requirements for doing some of that stuff other than just an office building. So, you know, I think I would hope that a compromise would see the building maintained and actively reused, but you know, I think that's probably.
You have an architect here? Okay, can I ask you a couple questions? I think you might be very, very important at this point, right? Looking at reconfiguring that building with the space, the small ceilings. Did you have any other drawings or any ideas of how they can redo this building without taking it to the ground and still making it beneficial to the business?
Yeah, I think that's something that I would want to, you know, discuss and deliberate with the owner to kind of. It's really about working through the feasibility piece of it, because some of those uses, like an event space, would probably require substantial parking as well.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm having all these ideas go through my mind, but like maybe a co-working space and stuff like that. Like, still, you're bringing a lot of people to this property where to really like fill both these buildings with people.
You still got a parking problem.
Right.
So my question, not to cut you off, but my question again is not so much as looking at a different business. We all agree that these are offices, right? So I'm talking about a different design without tearing it down. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Are you asking kind of like gutting the building and redoing the inside?
Yeah. To give you the functionality that you need. But again, I still feel I understand your point with the limited parking as well. But did you got, and I know you're representing ownership, but is this something that, I'm sure you're an architect, you can figure out something, right?
We haven't explored those options, but like I said, it's something that we can discuss and kind of work through the ideas and what the implications would be on every level of marketability, the site, architecturally, and try to come up with some kind of ideas, at least explore those options, so that we can have a discussion about it for sure.
Okay.
And, I mean, I just want to say too, I've kind of worked for Mr. Cipriano and the different groups on some of the other buildings in Harrisburg here, and I can tell like he really does want to bring rejuvenation, and so I'm excited about that. As an architect, I like to see rejuvenation come and not dilapidation, and not I don't necessarily like to see buildings torn down either. But I like to see a viable use that will bring that rejuvenation in, and so that's my opinion. Yeah.
And one last thing, I think Mr. Grover had to ask him a question. This is a taxable property for the city?
Currently.
Yes. So just make sure that we're thinking about that as well. Would that knocking it down, would that take away from that?
I don't know that it would take away. There would be one less building to tax, but then the lots will be consolidated.
Right.
And the consolidation would have its own tax effect.
So would it revalue? Yeah.
So, but why we're talking about that?
Come on, I knew that would give you a segue.
Yeah, the city's going to have to come to terms with what is a very stark reality that's coming down the pike. We have 16 of the major properties in the city office towers under tax appeal right now for significant reductions. We got word that the Commonwealth is not going to renew one of their leases for the tallest building in the city for 80% of the building. That lease expires next spring. The city, the county, and the school district have jointly retained professional appraisers because of the tax appeals. And the reports that are coming back, because they're being given access to the leases of the buildings inside them, they're giving access to the buildings themselves, is the buildings are essentially empty. Their leases are expiring. There's no expectation for renewals of many of these leases. The amount of the property taxes that we're trying to calculate out connected to these properties is significant. And this August, we expect a larger influx of those appeals for buildings that didn't appeal this year. And so 26 or 27, one of those years, when all these start to get to a resolution, there is going to be a significant loss to the city of Harrisburg's real estate taxes. And not just the city of Harrisburg. It's actually not even just a national phenomenon. It seems to be going around the globe right now. People after COVID have figured they don't have to be in office towers. And literally the state's design, tax design for cities, is to be dependent on real estate taxes. So it is a significant problem that's coming. I've talked with the mayor quite a bit about it. No one so far has come up with a good idea. But if this is an office use, I can tell you that there's thousands of spaces that are going to be empty. And I don't know, where you're going to be able to get people to get into these buildings as office uses. This is the simple reality of that we're all facing. And so I think council should at least be aware of that sort of framework of when you're talking about, is this really doable? I'll be frank, I don't think they'll ever be able to lease that as an office because they can't lease the other ones as an office, and they are type A buildings that they're dropping the rents and people aren't coming in. So you might put a very specialty thing in here, but that's not what we're seeing, and it's a problem that frankly keeps me up at night. But that's the reality that's coming for offices in cities, and it's something that a lot of people are going to have to work on to try and find a solution.
To kind of piggyback on Mr. Grover's point, I think that is the reality for Mr. Cipriani, is that if he can't use these buildings, he's going to have to file appeals on them because he's not going to keep paying taxes on something that he can't use. And these buildings are not like the Susquehanna Art Museum Bank building or the King Mansion or these other buildings that it's worth investing tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars in to make them something new and fresh and trendy and cool that people want to be a part of. These are architecturally insignificant buildings. There's no reason to keep them around. And so if you can't use them for an office, they're gonna sit. Next to my office at 100 Pine are the Benmar apartments. When Harristown came in and redid 2 office buildings and turned them all into apartment buildings. Those are market rate apartments. Those are expensive apartments because it costs a lot of money to go in and renovate an office building to turn it into an apartment or to turn it into another type of use. And so if the building doesn't have the size or the features to make it attractive, there's not a property owner or developer around that's going to be able to put the money into it to turn something like that. And that's why I think Mr. Grover's point is strong, is that that's why all these appeals are happening, and I think that's what Mr. Cipriani eventually gets stuck with if he has both buildings.
All right, I think that gives us a little clarity on this. So thank you guys, and I'll be looking forward to get some of that information that my colleagues requested and look over it and see what happens.
Thank you everyone for your questions and comments. I will refer this resolution to the next legislative session.
I just really quick to Mr. Ish, I just wanted to say, when you said they weren't significant, I think every building is significant. I do understand there's an issue here, and it's not being used as Mr. Cipriani would like it to be, and I understood what Mr. Grover is saying with what happened after the pandemic and how a lot of office spaces aren't going to be able to be used. But I don't think it's not significant. I think this building is significant. I just think it has to be looked at a different way. And I do understand the business part of it, the money part of it. I don't want to continue to pay for something that can't be used. So I understand that, but I do think COVID, our world changed, as we all know. And I think it made us become more creative in ways that we never thought we would. And the way we envision the world and what's happening has to be different. So I think, unfortunately, we all have to look at things differently. I don't know what else this space can be because I know we're looking to get more information from you. But I just didn't want you to go into it thinking it wasn't significant.
Understood, and I agree with you that every building is significant. What I think I said or intended to say was these buildings are not architecturally significant, and I think there's an important difference between the two, right? When we're talking architecture, we're talking about the look and the style.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Certainly.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank
I appreciate
you.
your time coming and your presentation.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ross.
Could I just add to that real quick?
Sure.
The architect, so there's a way to kind of measure the architecturally significantness of a building. So the international style, which was, this building was kind of built to imitate, there's about 11 points of features, that typical international style features. This building has 2.5 of those features. So I think with our documentation, maybe we could get you that documentation as well, so you can kind of measure that and consider it with all of your considerations.
I think that would be great. Thank you for that enlightenment. I didn't know there was a point system and what this building fell on, so I think that would be helpful, along with the what Mr. Knight presented, because he had some very valid points about why the historic, the board denied it. So I think all of that information is so important to put together to make such a, a touchy decision.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, Council.
Thank you.
Really quick, Council. I think the main thing here, and we've been talking about all night, is we're tearing down a building to make parking. And while that is essentially what, what the motions will be, it is to create viability for a building that was built that apparently has some, some historical or some kind of significant value. So it is kind of in a way to save another building that, you know, otherwise is really useless if we have to sit there. We you know, that's the main part here. It's not just to create parking, it's to create viability in another building and get a reuse in there.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for
it
that.
does. That part does make sense. I
yes.
do understand that. I think that's what makes it so difficult, because we have the facts, but we also have the understanding of what you all are saying. And when you do look at it, I mean, I do understand that the parking does seem to be an issue. It looks very crowded, but then it's very hard with the information that we have that is so honest from Mr. Knight to just tear it down without seeing what other options there are. I think that's the biggest piece. I don't know how much demo is going to cost. What other options could there be if not to demo it? So it's like it's kind of like blinding of, okay, you're just going to tear it down, but what else could you do? You know, it's just that part of it for me.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you again, and we will refer this to the next legislative session. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final committee business this evening comes from the Parks, Recreation, and Enrichment Committee. I will defer to our chair, Councilwoman Rawls.
Thank you, President Bowers. Tonight for Parks and Recreation, we have Resolution 37 of 2024. Mr. Parker, can you please read it in?
Yes. Resolution 37 of 2024. A resolution approving the disposal and destruction of certain equipment owned by the city of Harrisburg, which has exhausted its useful life for city operations, or has nominal value, no value, or less value than the disposal costs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parker. Is there anyone from administration who could please give us more information on Resolution 37 of 2024? And if there is, please state your name and your position here with the city.
Good evening, Council. My name is David Baker. I am the Facilities Director for the City of Harrisburg. In front of you, we're requesting to dispose of multiple different items that have met and far exceeded their life expectancy. Some of those items are things such as hood vents for the roof whenever we've replaced them and they're now, you know, out of service with new ones. Circulation pumps for water, old ice makers, microwaves, desks, chairs, you know, filing cabinets, you name it. We have a multitude of different pieces of furniture and old pumps and equipment and pulleys and everything that are sitting in storage right now waiting to be disposed of. As long as we get the go-ahead, then we will contact our Public Works Department. They'll bring out their clam truck and they'll take any of the items that are able to be taken to the recycling center. Once that occurs, the funds from the recycling center, I think, are sent directly to the city government center or the city treasurer's office. And then our finance department decides whether they go into a special fund or it goes into the general fund for the city.
Oh.
If you have any questions, please feel free.
I think we do have a question already. Thank you. I will not make Mr. Jones wait. Mr. Jones, do you have any questions, Councilman Jones?
How you doing, Mr. Baker? First of all, I want to make sure you're comfortable. You all right?
I'm good. I'm ready to go home.
All right. Just making sure you all right now.
Yeah, we don't want to scare you.
Yeah. Nah, that was the joke.
Yeah.
But I read through this already, but so there is some funds that can be made from it, the scrap metal then, right?
Correct, yes.
All right. That's it. That was the only question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I read through it too. It looks, it's very understandable instead of having those items sit around and we can get money from them. So I don't have any questions. I think it's a very smart and economic thing to do. President Bowers, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Vice President Green?
Thank you. I don't have any questions. We do this all the time. So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Councilwoman Davis?
Thank you, Councilwoman Rawls. I saw the list and the items are worth 0, so they're probably not worth very much either with scrap metal. So no more questions, no comments for me. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Councilwoman Daniels, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you. I recommend that Resolution 37 of 2024 be put on the next legislative agenda. And do you have to add anything else, Mr. Baker? No?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. See, we're easy.
Thank you. We will now open the floor for public comment. Just a few housekeeping notes. If there's anyone that would like to offer public comment, please state your name and your address for the meeting record. If you don't feel comfortable sharing your address, please share the vicinity in which you live within the city. You'll have 4 minutes to share your comments, and Mr. Parker will serve as our timekeeper. I'll begin to my right. Is there anyone that would like to offer public comment? No? Okay. Seeing and hearing no one. Anyone in the middle section? Okay. Seeing and hearing no one. Anyone to my left? Seeing and hearing no one. The time is 7:15 p.m. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. We stand adjourned.